Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I am so excited about today's guest because this is someone who not only is incredibly accomplished in her professional career, not only does she run an incredible business that does meaningful work that unlocks growth for others, but I love the way she articulates it, the way that her messaging is, because she makes it really clear how we can unlock that growth in our own businesses. And before I tell you about her, I actually want to read from her website here on the air because I think that you're immediately going to see why we've been so excited to have today's guest on the show. Here's what she's written on her website. Inefficient operations can cripple your startup, leading to missed deadlines, wasted resources, and unhappy customers. You are wearing too many hats and unsure where to focus your limited time and resources. Good news, you're in the right place. And that's because you're in great hands because today's guest is the amazing Brenna Souza. Brenna is the founder of Resonate Growth, which is an operational consulting firm for early stage startups and small businesses. As a Silicon Valley veteran, she spent 10 years supporting innovative entrepreneurs and driving success for some of the Valley's most successful founders. She's worked with executives in every department across multiple industries, including tech, government, banking, and real estate. Her tenure in the startup ecosystem allowed her to dip into the secret sauce, see what makes them tick, and spot when they're about to trip over their own shoelaces, which for all of us who are not only wearing a million hats, but we're involved in so many different projects, it's going to be so cool to hear Brenna's backstory and behind the scenes from all these businesses she's helped grow. Brena herself is also a serial entrepreneur, and prior to Silicon Valley, she owned a real estate appraisal firm for 10 years in Northern California. In 2020, she relocated to Texas. She took a sabbatical to focus on health and development. We're going to talk about that for sure because that's the life of an entrepreneur. She's now returned to entrepreneurship by merging her passion for helping others with her operational expertise. In her free time, you can find her hiking, gardening, or testing products for her organic aromatherapy line. Yes, Brenna's a hustler, just like all of us. I'm excited to learn from her, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Brenna Souza. All right, Brenna, I'm so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. I'm excited to be here. Really, I appreciate the opportunity.
Heck yes, I could brag about all of your accomplishments and the cool work that you do all day long, but before we get to the crux of the work that you do with Resonate Growth, take us beyond the bio. Who's Brenna? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a journey, right? Life's a journey. Well, like you mentioned, I'm originally from Northern California, lived there all my life till I relocated here to Texas about 4 years ago. Originally went to college and got a degree in tech. It was called Management Information Systems at the time. I don't know if they still have that degree, but it was kind of bridged the gap between computer science and business. And I'll date myself here. When I graduated, the dot-com bubble burst that year. So what was kind of a guaranteed job was like now no job. So at that point, sort of had to regroup. And to be honest, it wasn't my passion. It was something, it was a lesson in what happens when you follow your heart and maybe pursue security over passion. So it forced me to sort of regroup, and real estate was booming at the time, and I always loved real estate. So being that I'm not a salesperson, that's not my genius, I decided to pursue appraising, and that's an apprenticeship. You have to apprentice for 2,000 hours, and I hounded a couple brothers in the area to train me. And after about 2 years, I got my license, and I actually became the youngest female appraiser in Northern California for a few years. And shortly after, I opened my own firm, and I absolutely loved what I did. It was just something different every day. But then the real estate market crashed in 2008. And I would say within a year, the government came in with a lot of regulation and changed the industry completely, and not really for the better. So it was time to sort of reinvent myself again. And that took some soul searching. It took me a few years to really get a job that was meaningful, and surprised me, but turns out a lot of employers don't feel comfortable hiring people who've been self-employed for a long time, which I get, really, right? But not only that, I just didn't know where I would fit, in an organization, and neither did they. But after about 2 years, I did find my niche, moved down to San Francisco, which I loved, and became an assistant to a CEO. And it made sense to help other people run their business. And that sort of started my foray into partnering with executives. And I worked for a consulting firm. We were very busy, did a lot of government contracts, worked with a lot of commercial real estate vendors in the city. And eventually I moved over to corporate, which was First Republic Bank, which they're no longer. That bank is went under, I think, in 2023. But I supported the CIO there, and that's when I really learned like corporate was just not for me. And he moved on to retirement. I took that as my opportunity to get into startups, and I spent the next 10 years really loving that, and worked from some really genius people of all ages, all backgrounds, very technical products. Like you mentioned in my bio, multiple different executives, all the way to CEOs and founders. And really, like I said, I really enjoyed that. And then summer 2020, I got laid off after COVID hit, and I just took that as my opportunity to relocate. And I moved to Texas, but prior to that, I took a bit of like an 18-month sabbatical, and I camped and I hiked, and I just took time off to find myself. Eventually decided that I wanted to take all my wisdom and then sort of my love for helping young founders and leading them and put it into one package. And that's how I got here to Resonate Growth.
Yes, I love that overview, Brenna, for so many reasons, and particularly because obviously, I mean, it's in the name of your company, so there's no way to get around the fact that you love growth. You've lived inside of growth in so many different components, but I want to start with obviously the crux of where you focus on growth, and that is operations, because I'm going to call this out. I'll use myself as a very poor example, is that when I started my first business, I was 19, Brenna. I had no idea what operations were. I had no idea how real businesses operated. And so for me, when I thought about real businesses, it was a term I used very frequently in my mind, is I was just like, what am I doing differently that real businesses are actually doing? Because I want to start doing those things. To me, my operations was my to-do list. Like, it was my email inbox. It was things that were dictated just by the forces of what was happening. Take us beyond that more mature view of operations. What is operations? What are all the components that it touches and that separates real businesses from those who are just starting out that don't have those structures in place?
Right. I mean, I think at its basic core, I see operations as just your kind of the day-to-day, almost minutia. I hate to call it that, but you have to follow a series of processes to stay organized, right? You want to stay organized. You don't want to miss things. You got to hire people. You need to get an accounting firm. You hiring consultants. There's all these kind of little things that need to be established. And then in each of those departments, there's so many things that you just don't know about. And like you said, you're very young, you get started. And I think a lot of these VCs, a large majority of my clients are VC-backed startups, and that's a younger set, right? Early 20s. Oftentimes they're coming right out of college. They may have worked at like a Google or a Facebook, one of the FANG companies, and they have no idea either, right? And they have a genius idea. A lot of millions of dollars is thrown at them and some contacts, but nobody teaches them how to hire, how to effectively plan to recruit, how to set up some checklists, some forms, just templates, basic things that will keep you organized. So when you're doing the more high level strategic work, you're not like you don't get bogged down in, did I do this? Did I do that? You're just like checking boxes and setting yourself up for success. And this is a lot of things a lot of times I tell the founders I work with, like, it's so simple to just spend a little time in the beginning and get organized with your operations. How are you going to do X, Y, and Z? I need a chart of accounts. Let me get an accountant to set that up. How does accounting talk to sales? How does sales then talk to, IT? They all need to work together, all these departments. And when you don't really take the holistic view into account, or you don't know what you don't know, you really can set yourself up for a lot of problems down the road. And what I find is a lot of founders who don't come from an operational background, right? They're like, oh, I'll do that later. I can take care of that later. I'll hire somebody to do this later. And 20, 30, 50 people in, their headcount is now much larger. And the problem, what would have been an easy, something you could have built in a week, now becomes a massive retrofitting excursion. And it costs up 6 figures maybe, to fix. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure it does. Because Brena, I'm sure you also appreciate this. This is something that I love, having these types of conversations about how nonlinear business and life and entrepreneurship and growth journeys always are. Because hearing you talk about these things, you can effortlessly rattle off, we need accounting operations, we need sales operations, we need communication channels between departments. You know all of these things, but I love the fact that you very correctly and transparently point out that we don't know what we don't know. And so thinking about your average entrepreneur, your average founder, whatever term we want to use today, it kind of is this case of we're in the game, we're on the playing field, and we'll figure things out as they arise, versus having a more experienced mind like yourself to come in and say, hey, here's what's going to happen, not just today, but later on in the game. Let's address these now. How much of that is balancing, okay, this is what we're currently facing, let's figure it out along the way, versus this super strategic and intentional approach that you bring to the table?
Right. I mean, there's a healthy balance. Obviously, when you're, say, a VC-backed founder, I'll just use that VC-backed company as an example. You want to go build the product. You're aiming towards product market fit, customer acquisition, and really your foot needs to be on the gas in that direction. And there are some things that can be fixed later. But I think the balance is, number one, to prioritize people operations and to prioritize financial operations. A lot of other things can be let go, but if you don't prioritize financial operations and just getting in, basic, making sure you're doing your reporting, making sure you have the right chart of accounts. And of course you can hire a consultant to, do this for you. But when you're not prioritizing financial stuff, that comes back to really bite you in the butt in terms of taxes, penalties, that kind of stuff. And when you have to pay an accountant to fix something that you may have not been doing for the past year or two, that's obviously more expensive. On the people operations side, certainly there's AI and technology can really take us pretty far, but you still need people to build your business, to help you build your product. And your first 10, 100 hires are the most important in your business. And especially at the first 10 to 15, because their happiness and really you're going to need them basically to help you recruit more talent. So their happiness is paramount. Getting them onboarded efficiently is paramount. And I think there's a lot of, here's your laptop, let's code that goes on in the Valley. And I've experienced that. And there's a time and place for that, maybe your first few employees. But I would say definitely at 5 people and on, it's really time to have building blocks and put time into building blocks for recruiting, to set yourself up to recruit the right talent, to not waste time there, and then to onboard them in an organized way, a compliant way, and a welcoming way, a way that makes them happy that they chose your startup over the 10 other offers that they received. So I think maybe that's kind of the balance. There's just you got to get those things really nailed down. Otherwise, I think a good example of not doing this, there's a lot of examples I could use, but one would be if you've neglected, you hire a remote workforce and you're just hiring, and you've neglected to establish nexus in particular states, which is easy to miss. It can be. And then you bring on, head of HR at some point, and that head of HR has realized that you haven't been doing that, or the employee files are not compliant, you've missed filling out some forms. You're probably not going to be audited or sued, but that head of HR, instead of getting on the roadmap for which you hired them to do, they're spending weeks or months on this operational minutia, right? Bringing everything forward, bringing everything into compliance. And you're spending $200,000 or more, right, on this person's salary, and the first few months are spent doing very basic things. So it's just a massive financial resource suck.
Yeah. Brenna, I'll tell you what, you talk about this balance of figuring out along the way versus the intentionality that you talk about. I want to bring another balance into the conversation because it's something that was apparent to me when I was looking over your messaging and the way that you position yourself in the marketplace. And I don't see this balance called out often enough. And it is strategic versus tactical. It's something that I so appreciate about your service offerings is you very readily say, yeah, we can work on the tactical stuff, workflows, checklists, tools, systems. That's tactical stuff, as well as the strategic, the bigger thinking, because you've been there, you've been behind the scenes, you've seen fast growing companies. Talk to us about that, because I'll be honest with you, I only learned the difference between strategy and tactics over a chessboard. I once asked a master chess player, I was like, what is the difference? I mean, I feel like I don't have strategy or tactics. I just learned how to play chess. And the guy said to me, he goes, well, strategy is knowing what to do when there's nothing to do, and tactics are knowing what to do when there's something to do. If there's a piece that you can take for free on a chessboard, that's a tactic. You don't need a longer term strategy to know to take that piece. Talk to us about that in the business sense, because I feel like as CEOs of our own businesses and of our lives, there's a million things that we can be doing and that we should be doing, but how do you fit in the right tactics with the right overarching strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think strategically, I think it really helps, number one, if you're a founder, to have a network of founders, because these are the kinds of things you can discuss, right? When did you make a decision that ended up being a mistake? How do we strategize together? I think for me, and I hope this is going in the direction you're looking for, but when I worked for executives and we would strategize, it was more about long-term planning. Like, okay, we need to do these. This is what we know we need to do now. Let's get these tactical things in place. And then what we want to do is we're going to bring in this department head, and then that person's going to build out this, their department. Then we're going to go international, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But setting up checkpoints along the way before you move on to that next phase. And when I worked and supported very experienced executives who had done it before versus a younger set of executives who were new, they're like very keen about knowing, okay, we need to hit these like particular time blocks. Okay, we're going to do these things, and then we'll see where we land. And then we'll do some more tactical stuff, and then we'll see where we land. And knowing like sort of the different things that can come in to derail you along the way. And I think a lot of what I bring in terms of strategy to my clients, and when I was supporting executives, same with them, was when they want to make a decision in a moment, and it's like, okay, here's what my experience has shown me. If you make that decision, here's one of two outcomes. This is probably what's going to happen based on what I've seen, or here's the positive of that decision, here's the negative. Here's other alternative decisions that we could make, and here's the outcome that I've seen of those types of decisions. So in terms of strategizing, it's really trying to think of the long game and the stepping stones that will get you there. A lot of times when we think big picture, and I kind of suffer from this in my sort of aromatherapy business, I just sometimes want to be 5 years down the road, and I neglect a lot of just the building blocks in between because I'm excited about the creative process. I'm not focusing on the operations. So it's a little bit like that, I think, with the founders that I've worked with, right? They know their inherent genius and they're just wanting to get to the end game, and they don't always have somebody to bounce these ideas off of. Certainly not somebody who's seen a lot. Hope that helps.
Yeah, it's really well said, Brenna. I appreciate that example because I know it's going to resonate with 100% of our listeners. We all feel that way. That's so deeply embedded in the way that our entrepreneurial minds think. Is we're so hungry, we have so many ideas, and we want that growth now. But you talk about different decision points along the way, and actually, I want to expand that a little bit and talk about inflection points along the way. Because if I brag for you for a quick second here, you've worked with the CEOs and founders of companies that have a 43 billion with a B dollar valuation, for example. Another company that was acquired for 3.2 billion, again with a B. So Brenna, you've seen these massive stages and scales of growth, but it also means you've seen behind the scenes that there are inflection points along the way. Neither of those companies got into the billions overnight. They once were worth $1 or $10. And so there's a lot of growth that happens between there. That's a giant gap. There are many inflection points along the way. Talk to us about some of those inflection points. Is it things that they decided that just happened to work out? Is it great product market fit that they were able to establish? Was it incredible operations behind the scenes that just unlocked all those layers so nothing was standing in the way so they could grow? Give us some of those behind the scenes insights.
Sure. I think that there's a lot that goes into that, right? This tremendous success. I'd say with the one that's the $43 billion one, Databricks, a lot of their success. So I think I was employee 119, maybe there. So pretty early on, I think we were series B, and a lot of their success, first of all, the CEO's a genius, and multiple founders. They had 5, I think, co-founders, 5 or 6, great investors. And the investor, their main investor, Ben Horowitz, a lot of people may know him. He's an operator. He's built companies, and not a lot of VCs have been operators. They haven't gone in and built companies themselves. They're genius at what they do in spotting talent and opportunity. But that was one of the things that helped, right? Genius people and the right investors. And you can be intentional about your investors. You don't have to accept everyone that comes your way. So there's that. Also, great product market fit. I mean, that company, everyone wants what they have, which is why their valuation is so high. Very talented employees. They were great at hiring. They hired the right people and put a lot of intention into that. And they didn't really focus on operations. I'll say I did a lot of that. But by the time I had gotten there was like a head of HR, and there were a few department heads already. I more played a larger role in bridging the gap between all the departments and then growing with the CEO through all of these sort of different stages. And that was a 3x hyper growth company. I mean, we were hiring, I don't know, we would have like 20 or 30 new hires every single Monday. But they still managed to hire great people, even at that scale, at that amount. So I would say for them, those were some of the main things that really made them successful. That and really identifying the right partnerships, right? Google, Microsoft, they really went after the right partnerships and won them, but by and large also because they had great product market fit. I would say for the other company that was acquired by Twilio, they actually started with one intention in their product, and this happens with a lot of founders. They find that maybe tweaking it actually becomes the better fit. Like their initial intention isn't what everyone wanted. They, made some changes, and it took them down a different path. And it was very different sort of level success for that company, I found. Also, they hired great people, and the founders were very smart, but they also had great investors, I will say that. But they were they were very people focused, very talent focused. So they grew a really kind of great camaraderie within the organization, and then also did great at hiring. So I would say the companies that I've worked for that struggled or had a lot of internal drama, that really kept them from getting off the ground. The main differences were the people, and hiring the right people versus hiring the wrong people.
Yeah, it makes sense, Brenna. So many times throughout our conversation today, even in a short amount of time, you've said that word people so many times. And so that's why I want to switch gears and get into the people element of business, because we are also, as executives of our own businesses, we are also the people that are driving so much of this stuff up front. So I want to talk about executive support, because I called it out in the intro of you. I love the fact that you so intentionally took a sabbatical, took that time to reflect and to grow, and obviously launch something amazing into the world after that. But talk to us about the executive support function, because personal time management, finding the right assistant or business partner, these are important tasks that we don't have that foresight. A lot of us have never done that before. So offer that executive support to all of our listeners here on the air. What are those things that you look at? What are the important considerations within that function?
Right. I think it's a really underrated role, to be honest, especially in the startup world, or if you're even a small business, to expand the thinking around an assistant to more of an operational partner. Certainly, I mean, this runs the gamut, and this is sort of what you mentioned in finding the right type of assistant. It really depends on what you need. So I will help founders or small business owners really pin down what they do and do not need. Certainly you get people that will help you with your calendar and with time management, but one thing to really open your eyes to, and you open your mind to rather, is if you find the right person who can help take so much operational stuff off your shoulders, that can go far beyond just calendaring, booking your travel and submitting your expenses. Somebody who can sort of be the go-between between you and the staff, who can kind of be the mom or the pop, whatever you want to call it. But as a founder, you don't have time to kind of deal with all these small things. And the person that's your support system, your business partner, the person who's going to move your agenda along and help you win, is really such a key role, especially if you give them the opportunity to expand beyond the typical role of just kind of helping with scheduling. I've worked with a ton of great assistants, and then all the really good ones are operationally brilliant. And they know, they have their ear to the grindstone, right? Like, the staff tells you everything that's wrong, everything that's not working, where the gaps are, where the communication is not flowing, things that they would never tell the executive. So you can take opportunity to just fix those things, or take solutions to the executive. And I think if you can find the right business partner who can play this role for you and really just help you keep on task, number one, but help you see what you cannot see, help you see around corners, they will make you infinitely more successful. So I really think that executive support is a tremendously important role. And I think just on the human side, a big part of my job, honestly, was just sometimes emotional support or sounding board. When if you're CEO and you maybe don't have any co-founders, maybe you're the only founder, you got to be very careful about your persona and what you share with other executives. And you might just be insecure about a particular decision, or you don't know which way to go, or you're trying to hire an executive and I don't know if this is the right person or not. Or I just did a keynote speech. I don't think it went well. They don't have anybody. It's a lonely job. We all know that it's a lonely job. So having someone that can really just be your partner, I think, is a great key to success and will really help you go far beyond where you think you can.
Yeah, really well said. And these are important things for us to confront in our own growth journeys, Brenna, because they're big questions. This is high level stuff that you're talking about, and you've seen it work behind the scenes at these rapidly growing companies, which so many of us are targeting. That's what we really aim to do. And so I want to switch gears. I told you time would fly by in today's conversation, but I want to talk to you entrepreneur to entrepreneur as well, because all of this stuff, I know a lot of listeners are probably thinking, Brenna, all sounds great, but there's no way I can afford this type of support in my business when I'm just starting out. And so I think it's so brilliant here in the new year, the fact that you're productizing a lot of this support, and a lot of the support that you offer very intimately with your clients, you're making it available to the masses or on a more scalable format through the store and through the productization that we talked about. So give us some insights there, because I obviously know about it, but I want you to tell listeners about all the types of support that they can get.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I started to realize was I had built these massive workflows, right? I mean, these huge systems that for my clients, I just kind of dump onto their Google Drive or whatever, and they're instantly organized, and I train them on the process. But I would start to talk to smaller businesses, and exactly that, they couldn't afford it. But I want them to be successful. So there was some time spent on, well, how do I make a shift here? And I spent about 3 months, the last 3 months really, breaking down all those larger systems, if we want to call it that, into smaller chunks that I can put, in an online store, and people can just download. So I have one that's kind of an ebook. It's called a sourcing workbook, and it will take you like step by step, different pieces of how to research, how to prep to recruit, how to source talent, right? Developing a candidate persona, a performance profile, a very strategic interview plan, and how to do it. And then I have a use case for a head of engineering role where it's already done, right? So you can see, and you don't have to use it step by step, but it will help give you ideas. And sometimes, we just need a creative spark to be like, oh, that's how somebody else is doing it. Okay, I got it. I know what to do. Or you refine that process over time. So I've got things like that, email templates, onboarding templates, offboarding templates on how to, just the offboarding letters, termination letters, checklists on, okay, do this, do this, do this. Everything should be in this folder, in that folder. Then in the folders, there's file guides of like, this is the type of paperwork that you need to house in this folder. Here's how to organize compliant employee files, new hire paperwork, onboarding paperwork. All these things are sort of chunked out to help you stay compliant, make sure you're filling out the right documents, if you will, and onboarding and offboarding in a way that's like super welcoming, very people focused, very white glove, but also isn't going to get you in trouble with the government, in a few years because you've missed some paperwork. So I've broken all of this out into small pieces. So you might not need an onboarding checklist, but you really could use help with sourcing and how to rein that process in or refine it, or even start from the beginning from somebody who's seen a lot of people do it, and do it well. So that was my goal. And I think it's going to be really helpful. It's going to probably around 15 to 20 products. And I will build that out over time, especially for executives trying to source executive support and just don't know how to find the right fit. So that's sort of my next phase. But right now, for those who can't afford, to bring on operational support or can't afford large consulting engagements, or maybe don't need it. Maybe they don't need all that. They just need, a few email templates. I've piecemealed all that, and it's work that, really brings together everything I've been doing for, 10 or 20 years. So it has a lot of wisdom in it, I think.
Yeah, I love that, Brenna. Awesome. It's so cool because to me, everyone's just pumping out all these AI things these days. And the fact that you're bringing your real life experience from decades of actually doing the work and handcrafting these for so many different customers and clients and also companies that you've worked within. It's so cool. It's such an amazing offering. Listeners, we're going to drop those links in just a minute. But before we get there, Brenna, I always love asking this super broad question at the end of our sessions. And that is, what's your one best piece of advice? Knowing that we're being listened to not only by founders and CEOs, not only those entrepreneurs, but also, yes, those entrepreneurs out there. You are also one of us, Brenna. You're a fellow entrepreneur. So what's that piece of advice that you want to impart on all of our listeners here today?
Well, I think just to reiterate, right, a small leak can sink a big ship. And if you don't have time to do it now, when are you going to have time to do it right later? You know what I mean? You really don't put it off. These are small things. It's not that hard. It's just realizing that you do need to focus on this, that business building does require operational foundation if you're going to do it right and be successful. And if you sort of fail to do that, certainly you can still move forward, but it will trip you up further down the road when really you should be focused on high level strategic issues at that time. You don't want to be pulled back down into minutia and then paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix something that you could have done in the beginning. So just realize that is an important building block of building your company. And unfortunately, we do need to spend a little time in the stuff that is not quite as fun in the beginning, but it will pay off in dividends down the road.
Yes, I love that advice, Brenna. And I'll tell you what, the term that I always use is, as a podcaster, I know so many people email in and they just want the sexy stuff, Brenna. Everybody wants to talk about marketing and sales and revenue growth, but that's why I'm so appreciative of your insights here today, because this is the real stuff. You called it the building blocks. I think that's the most accurate way to talk about it. So it's the stuff that we all need to think of as CEOs and founders of our own businesses. Mm-hmm. So I'm so appreciative of that. I know that listeners will be keen to go deeper into the wonderful world of all the things that you're building, that you're doing, and of course, those products that you teased for us. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, you can definitely go to my website, www.resonategrowth.co. And I also have a blog on there that goes through a lot of this as well, kind of talks about hiring and onboarding and how you can build it for yourself. So you can find me, my products, and always, connect with me there, or LinkedIn. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Yes, listeners, and you know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Super easy to remember Brenna's business website. It's resonategrowth.co. You can click right on through. We're also linking to her personal LinkedIn. So if you want to continue the conversation with her, or if you know a founder, especially these VC-backed founders that we talked about a lot today, Brenna can be a secret weapon in their toolkit. So whether that's you or you want to introduce her to someone else, don't be shy about reaching out on LinkedIn. Truth be told, most people are shy. Most people, when they hear amazing guests on these podcast episodes, they're way too shy to actually reach out. So find those links down below. Otherwise, Brenna, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Wonderful. Thank you. I had a great time and really appreciate the opportunity.